Sextus Empiricus was a Roman physician in the 2nd century CE. His books, in several volumes, are classic works of doubt. Skeptics such as Sextus Empiricus would set up a proposition into two different positions and then argue a dependent notion for each side until they found a contradiction. At that point, they would dismiss the original idea. Empiricus is well known for beginning arguments with propositions that would not deny the gods. He would then render the entire gods concept so absurd by his reasoning that he effectively canceled it out. His interesting arguments on God can be found in Book 3 of the Outline of Pyrrhonism, On God, and in Against the Dogmatists, in a section titled Concerning the Gods. Ascendant Christianity took over, and skeptic philosophy went into decline until Descartes, 1596 to 1650 ACE, the originator of modern philosophy. In his Meditations, 1641, he ponders if there is any certainty with regard to any knowledge. He decided there was none. Descartes used radical skeptical doubt to destroy belief in any theory. He used the device of the invisible demon who might be tricking him into perceiving himself performing mathematical calculations in the world. And yet none of those things might be true, neither the calculations nor the world. He decided only his thought existed. From this concept came the famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes' cogito ergo sum was not the final answer. Critics pointed out that the demon could deceive us about our thoughts. The British empiricists of the 17th and 18th centuries depreciated reason and stressed empiricism. Empiricism prevails today, but the two philosophical methods remain in conflict. Locke, Berkeley, and Hume address the issue that our ideas are all we can positively know. Each of them queried the question of how can we know the external world corresponds to our ideas. Locke's theories led to a form of skepticism, though he was not a skeptic. Berkeley set out to defeat atheism and ended up eliminating the external world entirely from his theory. David Hume, 1711 to 1776, is considered one of the greatest British philosophers. He was what he called a mitigated skeptic, but his views on knowledge are extreme and brilliant at the same time. Hume believed that our knowledge of the existence of anything outside ourselves could ultimately derive from experience alone. We can never know with certainty whether a material world exists or not. Causality was also a matter of doubt for Hume. You see a ball fall and you assume gravity caused it to fall, but Hume denies that is the case. The two are causally connected in our mind. A happened, then B happened. We have no real proof, even if the sequence happens over and over. Hume also began questioning the idea of a self, which the postmodern philosophers would take up in the 20th century. He found that when he introspected, he could only contemplate his thoughts and emotions, not a continuous self. He decided that there is no observational evidence of a self or of a God. He stated that a miracle is a violation of the laws of nature, and since firm and unalterable experience has established these laws, the proof against a miracle from the very nature of fact is as entire as any argument from experience can possibly be imagined. We will elaborate on this statement in a moment. Even if they are not skeptics, Hume has taught thinkers to be careful when looking at specious arguments. He was able to recognize when a line of argument does not obey the rules of logic and makes an incorrect leap. He explains that to make a movement from everything we observe has a cause to the universe has a cause is too big a leap entirely. One thinker has paraphrased this idea by saying, because everyone has a mother, then the entire human race has a mother. Before Hume, many thinkers put metaphysics into kind of a safe area as an exception, or stated that it should be handled differently, allowing it to be held to different standards when conducting an inquiry. We find thinkers of a theistic bent doing the same today. Hume was not willing to allow metaphysics to occupy a privileged space. He insisted that it be held to the same standards as other areas of research, such as that of ethics or physical science. He wanted such concepts as that of God, the immortality of the soul, and the possibility of miracles to be subject to rigorous examination, such as other areas of inquiry are required to submit to. He ultimately arrives at examining the concept of God through logical reasoning. Why do we need to believe in the existence of God, a being which is singular, the only one of its kind? We have no experience of this so-called being. We cannot believe arguments that just because the universe exists, there is a creator. We shall see more of this idea too in a minute. What in our experience shows the concept of God has been proven? By applying logical reasoning, the concept of God has no real meaning, and we are not obligated to accept it. The God concept is by no means certain, Hume cautions those who would argue for certainty. One of the most famous arguments for God had come from Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval philosopher. Aquinas' arguments are still in play today. Many of we atheists know them as cosmological arguments, but they have been refuted over and over, most devastatingly by Hume first. Non-believers will recognize this so-called proof of God from Aquinas. Everything that exists has a cause. The cause of us is our parents. The cause of my parents is their parents. Aquinas and others keep going back and back until finally one gets to the ostensible cause of the universe, or in modern terms, the Big Bang. Theologians say there must be a cause for that. God is the uncaused first cause. Wait, says Hume, this is too big a leap. Remember, Hume did not believe in causality so much as constant conjunction, a relation between events in nature. Here is nature. Inside nature, there is a relation between pairs of events called causality. So it is fine to question the cause of events in nature. But Hume believes that this is a false analogy, an incorrect expansion of the concept to try to ask what the cause of all nature would be. We cannot go outside the entirety of nature and apply the relation of causality to all nature itself. Another argument for God, also still very much in play today, although not nearly as difficult to refute, is the teleological argument, famous or infamous by now. In the early 19th century, William Paley says that early one morning, while walking, he stubbed his toe on a pocket watch. Paley believed it irrational to claim that the watch appeared in front of him by means of random interactions of matter. In other words, lightning struck the sands, and the different minerals in the soil formed. Gradually, stainless steel and glass came about, and hands turning around and becoming a pocket watch. Or is it more rational to believe that an intelligent creature made this watch and left it there? Paley says, of course we rationally think a designer made this watch. Since the universe is infinitely more complex and contrived than the watch, it is completely rational to believe the universe and its order has had a designer, God. Now we can see how canny, how clever Hume is. He does not attack Paley mano a mano. He retreats, gives Paley a little room. Okay, Hume says, if you want to argue and believe that the order of the universe has been created by a designer, that is fine. Throw in the world too, as that is part of the universe. But did anyone notice that the order of the world is not perfect? There are floods, earthquakes, poverty, illness, misery, planets collide, stars explode. So the argument for creator and designer only seems to imply that the designer or creator is limited both in intelligence and power. A partly ordered, imperfect world must be the product of a partly powerful and partly intelligent God. When he finishes his inquiry, he makes a shocking, but to non-believers, satisfying statement. When we run over libraries, persuaded of these principles, what havoc must we make? If we take in our hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quantity or number? No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact and existence? No. Commit it then to the flames, for it can contain nothing but sophistry and illusion. Hume on miracles is a wonderful section of his written work. He considers the authority of Scripture and tradition as found on the testimony of the apostles, who were so-called eyewitnesses to the miracles of Jesus, by which Jesus proved his divine mission. We have no so-called proof or authority for this belief from our own experience. As Hume says, the evidence for the Christian religion is less than the truth of our senses. We do not have time to repeat his keen statements considering the probability of miracles, but they are readily available on the web and in text. After his discussion on the improbability of miracles, he states that today it takes a miracle for any reasonable person to believe in the Christian religion. Hume's much-quoted phrase that reason is the slave of the passions is another of his important concepts. He thought that people can only live by custom and habit. Even though Hume believed that there were virtually no moral truths that could be proved to be certain, he thought that men's empathetic feelings of sympathy for other humans and respect for the social customs of their lands would serve to keep people orderly and content. Immanuel Kant, 1724-1804, posited that we can't know the thing in itself and we cannot apprehend the real world correctly through our limited sense apparatus. Charles Sanders Peirce, the American pragmatist, was an empiricist, as was John Dewey. Karl Popper's falsifiability is the concept that scientific theories must always be provisional, and that scientists should think of ways that their theories could be falsified. Popper was a very influential 20th century philosopher who would not call himself a skeptic, but some thinkers find his general approach similar to Pyrrho. Bertrand Russell, the 20th century British philosopher, was a renowned thinker and social critic. Russell's skepticism is a version of mitigated skepticism, namely that some information is more reliable than other information, but that none of it, except for primitive data, can be absolutely certain.